The words echoed in the sudden, brutal silence of the diner. "You're done. Hand over your apron." Fired. For being late, for showing compassion, for stopping on a desolate road in a relentless storm to help a stranger. Denise Carter, a woman whose kindness was her only currency, watched her world crumble. But what she didn't know was that the stranger, the very man she'd saved from the tempest, was watching too. And his return would not just change her life, but redefine justice itself. The storm that night was a living, breathing beast, clawing at Denise's old pickup, trying to rip it from the road. Exhaustion was a heavy cloak, her uniform still damp from a spilled coffee pot hours earlier. All she craved was the quiet warmth of her small apartment. Then, through the blurry veil of rain, a black luxury sedan, hazard lights blinking weakly, its hood up, steam curling like a desperate plea. An elderly white man, drenched and shivering, struggled with a dead phone, his face a roadmap of fatigue and despair. Denise hesitated. The world taught you to mind your own business on nights like this. But she saw the tremor in his shoulders, the futile struggle against the elements. A sigh escaped her lips, a silent surrender to her own conscience. She pulled over. "You okay out here?" she called, her voice cutting through the downpour. He turned, startled, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. His car was dead, no tow trucks answering, lost in the rural darkness. Without a second thought, Denise unlocked the passenger door. "You'll freeze. Get in." He slid in, dripping onto her worn seat, a stranger accepting an act of pure, unasked-for grace. The heater barely wheezed, but it was a promise of warmth. "You didn't have to stop," he murmured, his voice laced with gratitude. Denise shrugged, a small, weary smile touching her lips. "Guess I did. Can't leave someone's granddad melting in the rain." He let out a faint chuckle, introducing himself as Henry Weston. He'd been caught in the storm, his car giving up the ghost. Denise didn't pry, she just drove, the steady rhythm of rain on the roof a companion to their shared silence. She took him to her modest one-room flat, a sanctuary from the relentless night. A towel, a warm cup of instant soup, her only blanket, she offered it all, ignoring his protests, until he finally drifted off on her worn couch. Denise sat by the window, watching the storm subside, a quiet peace settling over her. She had done the right thing. Before dawn, she left for work, finding the couch empty, the blanket folded, and a simple note. "Thank you for seeing me as a person." She folded it carefully into her pocket, unaware that this small act of kindness was about to unleash a storm of its own. The morning was a stark contrast to the previous night's drama, yet equally chilling. Denise rushed into the diner, 10 minutes late, her hair still damp, her breath ragged from the sprint. The smell of frying bacon and cheap coffee, usually comforting, now felt like an assault. Steve Harlow, the manager, a man whose ambition was only matched by his cruelty, was already barking orders. "Carter, you think time bends for you?" His voice dripped with contempt, loud enough for the growing morning crowd to hear. Denise lowered her eyes, her chest tightening. "I'm sorry, sir. I had to help someone. An older man broke down in the storm." Steve cut her off with a dismissive wave. "You think good deeds pay rent? You're late. That's all that matters." He turned to the customers, his voice rising, a performance for his audience. "If any of you want to show up late too, maybe you can join her out the door." A few nervous chuckles, a few averted gazes. Denise's plea was a whisper. "Please, Mr. Harlow. I've worked here 4 years. You know I don't." He pointed to the door, his face a mask of cold resolve. "You're done. Hand over your apron. I don't need excuses. I need reliability." The diner fell into a stunned silence. Denise untied her apron, her hands trembling, her jaw tight, refusing to let him see her break. She laid it carefully on the counter, a surrender of her livelihood, her dignity. As she walked out, the bell above the door jingled a final, mournful chime. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but it stung worse than any downpour. She pulled her coat tighter, walking into an uncertain future. Behind her, Steve smirked, straightening his tie. "Perfect timing," he muttered. "Owner's finally coming today. Last thing I need is charity cases making the place look sloppy." Outside, Denise paused at the corner, her reflection faint in a puddle. She had done the right thing, she was sure of it, but right didn't pay bills. She didn't notice the black sedan rolling slowly past the diner, its tinted window lowering just slightly. Inside, Henry Weston watched her walk away, his face unreadable. The note she had given him, "Thank you for seeing me as a person," rested on the passenger seat. He adjusted his tie, his gaze fixed on the diner's flickering sign. "So, this is where she works," he said softly. And then he pressed the gas. What happened next would rewrite both their lives. By noon, the diner buzzed with a nervous energy. The rain had cleared, sunlight spilling through the windows, the air thick with the scent of coffee and fresh pie. Steve Harlow, a picture of false confidence, straightened napkin holders for the 5th time, his nerves a tight knot beneath his forced smile. The staff whispered, a buzz with the impending visit of the elusive owner. At precisely 12:30, the door chimed. A tall, silver-haired man stepped inside, dressed in a dark, tailored coat, his presence calm yet commanding, silencing the room without a word. The cook froze mid-turn at the grill. A waitress stopped with a coffee pot half raised. Steve hurried forward, his salesman's smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Weston, welcome, sir," he gushed, his voice high with feigned warmth. "Everything's running perfectly, clean, efficient, just like you'd want it." Henry Weston scanned the diner, his eyes moving over every detail, every face, until they settled on the empty corner where Denise used to work. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Where's the young woman from last night?" he asked, his voice even, betraying no emotion. Steve blinked. "I'm sorry, sir?" "Denise Carter," Weston clarified, "the waitress who worked here yesterday morning." Steve forced a laugh. "Oh, her. I had to let her go, I'm afraid. Always late, poor attitude, not the kind of image you'd want for your business." Weston's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed cut through the chatter like a blade. He turned to the cook. "Is that true?" The cook looked at his shoes. "No, sir. Denise was the best we had." Steve's smile faltered. "People like to exaggerate. I run a tight ship here." Weston stepped closer. "You fired her this morning." "Yes, sir, for cause." Weston nodded slowly. Then, his voice quiet but firm, he issued an order that sent a chill through Steve's heart. "Call her back. Immediately." The color drained from Steve's face. "Sir, that won't be necessary. I said call her back," Weston repeated, his voice now a steel trap. The room went dead quiet. 5 minutes later, the bell chimed again. Denise stepped inside, still in her wrinkled uniform, confusion etched on her face, unsure why she'd been summoned. Weston's eyes softened when he saw her. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice steady but warm. "You helped me last night when no one else would. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. You just saw a person who needed help." Whispers rippled through the diner. The cook dropped his spatula. The waitress gasped. Weston continued, his voice ringing with authority. "You showed me what this place should represent, so I'm making it official. Denise Carter is reinstated as co-manager, effective immediately." Steve's jaw fell open. "You can't be serious. "I'm very serious," Weston interrupted. "You wanted to impress me, Mr. Harlow. Congratulations. You just did. The wrong way." The staff clapped quietly, relief flooding the room. Denise stood speechless, tears brimming in her eyes. Weston smiled faintly. "You gave me kindness in the rain. I intend to return it with respect." The bell above the door jingled again as new customers walked in, unaware they were stepping into a diner that had just changed forever. Weeks later, the diner was alive again, transformed. Mornings buzzed with regulars, coffee flowed steadily, and laughter echoed through the booths. Under Denise's quiet, compassionate leadership, everything ran smoother than ever. Tips increased, customers lingered longer, and Weston's visits became less about oversight and more about pride. But not everyone shared that pride. Steve Harlow's smile had gone hollow. Demoted, He now worked the register, just another employee answering to the woman he had once humiliated. Each time she passed by, polite and unbothered, something dark festered behind his calm facade. He stayed late after hours, pacing the kitchen, muttering to himself. Then came the missing cash. At first, it was small amounts, 50 here, 70 there. Denise, meticulous in her late-night counts, caught it. She checked twice, then 3 times. No mistakes. She didn't accuse anyone, but a cold knot of worry settled deep in her gut. When it happened again, she went straight to Weston. "I've balanced every register myself," she said, her voice tight. "It's deliberate. Someone's trying to make it look like I'm stealing." Weston studied her face. "Do you have any guesses?" "None I can prove," she replied. He nodded. "Then we'll find proof." That evening, hidden cameras were discreetly installed near the counters. Weston brought in a quiet man in plain clothes, a private investigator. Only he and Denise knew. Days passed. Denise worked as usual, her smile unwavering despite the unease. Steve kept to himself, but his eyes lingered too long on the drawer she used. Then, one Tuesday night, as the rain returned outside, the camera caught it. Steve waited until Denise left early to handle a delivery. He opened her register, pulled out a stack of bills, then replaced her count slip with one of his own. He even smiled, whispering, "Let's see you talk your way out of this." The next morning, Weston called a full staff meeting. Everyone gathered around the counter, confused. The investigator placed a small laptop on the table and hit play. The footage rolled. The silence was brutal. Steve's hand, the money, the smirk, everything. He went pale. "That's edited," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She's setting me up." Denise didn't move. Weston's voice cut through the noise, calm but cold. "You framed the one person who saved me. You tried to ruin her reputation in my business. I built this place on trust, and you made it rot." 2 officers stepped in quietly. The handcuffs clicked before Steve could utter another word. He shouted curses as they let him out, but no one looked up. The rest of the day, the diner stayed oddly quiet. Denise worked her shift as usual, polite but distant. When Weston approached later that night, he said softly, "You handled it with grace. Most people would have screamed." She smiled faintly. "I learned something that night in the rain. Some storms you stand through, others pass on their own." The neon sign flickered against the wet glass outside. This time, its reflection looked cleaner. 6 months later, the diner bore little resemblance to the place Denise had been fired from. The windows gleamed, the new sign above the door proudly read, "Rainy Day Diner," and every seat was filled. People came not just for the food, but for the story, the one about a waitress who helped a stranger and changed both their lives. Inside, the air was warm, filled with laughter and the aroma of fresh coffee. Denise moved easily through the room, clipboard in hand, offering a smile to everyone she passed. Staff members worked smoothly under her direction, proud to be part of something built on respect instead of fear. Weston sat in his usual corner booth, quietly watching her work. The press had written about her months ago, calling her the heart behind the diner's rebirth. When a local reporter asked what made him give her half ownership, he'd said only, "She gave me kindness when she had nothing. That's worth more than profit." That night, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. "We built this place on compassion," he announced, his voice resonating with conviction. Denise reminded us what that means. "Today, I'm making it official. She's not just co-manager anymore, she's my partner." The staff broke into applause. Denise covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed. Weston handed her an envelope, legal papers confirming full partnership. "You've earned every bit of this," he said, his eyes full of admiration. Later, as the lights dimmed and the last customers left, Denise stepped outside for air. Across the street, under the neon glow of a car wash sign, a familiar figure scrubbed a windshield. Steve Harlow, his shoulders hunched, uniform damp from the mist. For a long moment, she just watched him. Then she walked across the street, calm and composed. He froze as she stopped beside him. Without a word, she handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked, his voice low, wary. "Your name's on it," she said. "Open it when you're ready." She turned and walked away. When he finally tore it open, he found a small check made out to a local charity and a donation receipt in his name. Under it, a handwritten note. "Everyone deserves a second chance. I had mine." Back at the diner, Denise flipped the sign from closed to open. The morning light crept through the glass, reflecting off the polished counter. She tied her apron, her movements calm and sure. The first customer walked in, shaking off rain from his coat. Denise smiled softly. "Morning," she said. "Welcome to Rainy Day Diner, where kindness is always on the menu."